things have filled in a little bit, haven't they? Hey, just for fun, just turn to everybody driving up Appalachian Parkway and smile and wave, let them know we're not an angry mob. How you doing over there? Our keynote speaker has been a marriage and family advocate for 25 years, and then some. He was the driving force behind successfully passing the Marriage Amendment, which protected the definition of marriage in our state constitution. As a native Floridian, he attended Florida State University, where he studied political science and philosophy before obtaining a Juris Doctorate of Law at Cumberland School of Law at Samford University. In 1987, he founded the Institute for Conservative Studies, a permanent student-led think tank at Florida State University, and it was then that I met him. His legal and political and family advocacy has appeared on ABC News Nightline, Fox News, C-SPAN, MSNBC, Court TV. He's been quoted in the New York Times, The Economist, and on NPR. In featured article work, he has been called by the Miami Herald one of the most interesting and influential people you've never heard of. In 2009, Orlando Magazine named him one of the most powerful people, top 50 most powerful people in Central Florida. But to me, more than any of that, I have been privileged to call him my friend since 1987. He is someone that I hold in the highest regard and esteem. I respect more than I could express to you. And he is our guest and keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Stemberger.
Well, it is great to be with you. I lived for 10 years in Tallahassee, and I love to come back to the beautiful weather and the culture and the people like you. I lived here for 10 years, from 85 to 95. My wife and I, we have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and we like to very carefully teach them the difference between men and women and the uniqueness between men and women. Hopefully without not being too Victorian or too masculine or too macho, we teach them masculinity and femininity. And so my son Joseph, my wife Olivia said, "Where are you going? What is this thing you're speaking to?" I said, "It's a We the People rally." She says, "What is that?" I said, "Well, it's kind of like a tea party." Well, she told my son. My son said, "Where's Daddy going?" I said, "Daddy's going to a tea party." My son comes up to me and says, "Dad, tea party, you're going to a tea party. Isn't that a little bit girly for you?" And I said, "Son, no, this is a very manly tea party, a very masculine tea party. It's reminiscent of the tea party that took place long, long ago in American history." We had a little talk about that historical tea party, which Samuel Adams called this. Listen to this. He said that the Boston Tea Party was a principled protest, and the only remaining option the people had to defend their constitutional rights. A principled protest, and the only remaining option the people had to defend their constitutional rights. And I really like the fact that Preston has named this We the People and made it more broad and more inclusive. Because this is not just about the advancement, our frustration with the advancement of a socialist society, and it very much is that. Our federal government has reached our federal government, whose reach used to be limited to a certain core functions, now totally dominates virtually every area of life. The regime, as I call it, has taken over healthcare, student loans, banking industry, insurance, the automobile industry, the internet, 401ks. It's unimaginable. But economic questions and debates will always be with us. A more primary question is, who are we as a culture? Who are we as a people? It's not just about, he's exactly right, it's not just about Democrats versus Republicans. It's not just about even liberal versus conservative or big versus small government. It's about whether or not we're going to be Americans or Europeans. It's about whether or not we're going to be right or wrong. It's about answering the most basic, fundamental questions of all human existence. What's right and wrong? See, when we say we're taxed too much, we're making a moral argument. We're saying that's wrong. You know what I love? Thou shalt not steal presupposes private property. Then we have private property rights. rights, doesn't it? Isn't that interesting? You ever think about that? Thou shalt not steal presupposes that I have something that belongs to me and not to you, Mr. Government. But that's a moral question, isn't it? And so these are all moral questions. You know, when our federal elected officials in Washington, D.C., our congressmen and our senators, when they're elected, they take an oath of office. And they raise their right hand and put their left hand on Holy Scripture, and they repeat in part these words. They say, I do solemnly swear that I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And ladies and gentlemen, we have federal elected officials in Congress and ones all the way down to City Hall that are absolutely clueless about the threat, about the enemies abroad and the enemies at home. And in some cases, they're literally in bed with them, aiding and abetting the enemy, encouraging them and funding them. It couldn't be more serious. The enemies are abroad. And let me just say this, you know, the Dale Carnegie inside of me doesn't like using the word enemies. And sometimes I say opponents, but you know what? The oath of office says enemies, right? It's a constitutional requirement. It's not our words. The Bible talks about enemies. We're supposed to love our enemies. That doesn't mean we can't oppose them as well. I'm mostly familiar with the enemies at home, but in the last year I became very familiar with the enemies abroad, who are mainly found in our battle with radical Islamic jihad. Now let me just say this, there are millions of Muslims that want to mind their own business, view their faith as a cultural expression, and just want to go about their business and have freedom of religion. And to them I say, you can be an American. But there are others, a minority, that's a growing minority, they're becoming radical and want to impose Sharia law upon the rest of the world, starting with America and throughout. That's a huge problem. Many of you know I represented a little girl named Rifka Berry. How many of you know who Rifka Berry is? She was a 13-year-old girl several years ago in Ohio. She walked into a Korean Methodist church. Never had been in a church, a devout Muslim family. Went to a mosque that was a special mosque. They passed 8 other mosques to get to this mosque in Columbus. She goes into the Methodist church and she hears Christians singing for the first time. In Islam, it's considered sensual and blasphemous to sing. She'd never heard this. And she's broken. She begins to weep and she's converted to Christianity. She realizes this is a very serious thing, and so she hides for 3 years. Hides books under her bed. And her father found Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And he has a very serious talk and says, you have unbroken generations of Islam and you must not bring dishonor to this family. So she respectfully just listens. And then the mosque found out on Facebook that she had become a Christian. And they went to the parents and said, you must deal with this immediately. You're bringing great dishonor to not just your own family, but to the entire Islamic community here and to this mosque. And so the parents threatened him. The father said, you must denounce your faith. You must do it now. I will kill you. You are dead to me. And he threatened her life. She said, Father, I will continue to study Islam just to de-escalate. Then they found a book on Esther in her bedroom. That's when they said, we're shipping you back to Sri Lanka. And so that's when she ran. She took a bus to Orlando, Florida. And I ended up representing her for several months.